All right, good morning again, everybody. How we doing? Yeah? Good. You look good. You look fresh. At least I think so, if I weren't so blinded by these lights. My gosh. Happy to be here. I'm very excited for us to continue this morning on this journey forward that we have been on all week. But before we do, if you don't mind, I actually want to start by taking a little look back. So last week, my wife and I did something that honestly, I haven't done in a really long time. It was last Wednesday. So if you remember, it was like the ultimate polar vortex, freezing cold day from Satan. You remember this? Yes. And so my wife and I, we decided to snuggle up on the couch and watch a movie. But because it was so cold and so dark and so depressing outside, we decided to level up a little bit, and we decided to make some popcorn to go with our movie. And I'll be honest, I haven't made homemade popcorn. And of course, when I say homemade, I mean like the Orville Redenbacher 3 minutes in the microwave package. Like, I haven't made that bag of popcorn in so long, like since I was a kid. And it's objectively not very good popcorn, right? But there's something about it. And I remember when I was a kid, this is kind of gross and kind of vulnerable of me to share, so don't judge me. But when I was a kid, when I would finish the bag, I would take a spoon and I would scoop out the insides of the bag where there was the excess butter, and I would eat that. Some of you did that and you're as messed up as I am. But it was so good. It was delicious. And so my wife and I, we just had this really nice night where we sat on the couch, we watched a movie, we ate our popcorn, I ate scooped up butter substitute. It was really nice. It was just sort of this nostalgic experience for me. And for me, I am the type of person who loves that. I love nostalgia. I mentioned before, my wife and I, we love taking classes at Orange Theory Fitness. And at Orange Theory, they have this device called the ab dolly. I have a picture of it. It looks like this. It's the one on the left up there. That's the ab dolly. And the first time that I saw an ab dolly, I got all of this nostalgia welling up in me because it reminded me of something from my past. Right? You knew gym class was going to be lit when those came out. Until you broke your finger in one of them. You know what I mean? Those are serious. The other day, I was actually cleaning out this drawer in my kitchen where we keep all this stuff, and you will never guess what I found in that drawer. Come on now. It was one shaped like a cat. Silly bands were super dope. A questionable fashion choice in hindsight, but still super dope. And for me, honestly, there's nothing more nostalgic than perhaps music, right? Come on, don't pretend you did not listen to the Joe Bros. You know, come on, sing it with me. 'Cause I'm slipping into the love. Don't pretend you don't know it. And I'm trying to keep from going under. And baby, you turn the temperature hotter. 'Cause I'm burning up for you, Jesus. You guys didn't do the Christian version? Okay, never mind. No, but I don't know why. I just love nostalgia. I love looking back. And while I think there is this sort of good, healthy kind of nostalgia where we sort of long for the old days, I believe that many of us suffer from a more negative kind of nostalgia. I believe that many of us in our walk with God, we suffer from what I like to call spiritual nostalgia, where even though we have made a step forward with God, we are following Jesus, we still have moments or we still have seasons in our lives where we start to go back to our old ways, or we start to go back to our old life. There's an old school churchy word for this. They call it backsliding. Like for me, every year, I tell myself I am going to stop eating entire Home Run Inn frozen pizzas. Every year, it's on my list of New Year's resolutions. I'm not going to eat an entire pizza anymore. It is now February, and I have eaten 3 entire Home Run Inn pizzas this year, which is better than most years, to be totally honest. Or for me, in my spiritual life, I can't tell you how many times I have made the commitment that I'm going to spend more time in prayer. right? I am going to spend more time with God. But then I'm laying in my bed late at night, and Netflix just looks so good. And so I bow down to the binge-watching gods, right? Or maybe for you, this year was the year where you said you were going to get back to church, or you were going to start reading your Bible a little bit more consistently. But recently, you've gotten sort of lazy with it, and you've just gone back to whatever you used to do on Sunday mornings. There's some of you in this room who maybe you made a promise to yourself, or you made a promise to your family or to your friend or girlfriend that you weren't going to go on those websites anymore. You weren't going to watch those videos. And you did really good for a while. But then one sort of slow and lonely day came along, and you actually felt tempted to go back to something that you promised yourself you were going to leave behind. You see, I think every single one of us has areas of our lives where we want to move forward so desperately, but we hit a point where it's actually pretty tempting to turn around and go back. And that's where we find the Israelites this morning. For those of you who have been with us all week, we've been looking at the Israelites' journey to the Promised Land. And we last saw the Israelites where it looked like they were lost. It looked like they were just wandering in confusion. But what we discovered yesterday is that God did not lose the Israelites, but he was actually just getting ready to use the Israelites. What we learned yesterday was God was actually setting up an opportunity to showcase his power. And part of this setup that God had was to entice Pharaoh, the leader of Egypt, where the Israelites had been enslaved. God wanted to entice Pharaoh to go after and pursue the Israelites. And you see, Pharaoh, he had recently let the Hebrew people go. And so he had no slaves anymore. So I'm sure Pharaoh woke up one day and thought, oh, geez, I have no one to work for me now. I have no slaves to serve me. I'll take my slaves back, please. And so what Pharaoh does is, the Bible tells us, he got every chariot in all of Egypt. He mobilized every chariot and he began to pursue the Israelites. And in Exodus chapter 14, verse 10, it says this: as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." So let's review here real quick. At this point in the story, God's people, who have spent their entire lives as slaves, they have been forced to do hard labor. They've been treated as subhuman, treated as property. They have been praying to be freed from this slavery for generations. And finally, now, God has answered that prayer. God has heard their cry and liberated them from slavery at last. And here, at the banks of the Red Sea, at the first sign of trouble, they want to go back. They actually want to return to Egypt. They actually wish they had never left slavery. Because you see, here is what is happening at this point. Even though the Israelites are physically free, they are still slaves in their minds. And the same thing happens to you and I on our journey with God. You see, many of us objectively, we know that we have been set free from our sin, but we still live enslaved to that sin in our minds. My wife and I, we have a dog. His name is Buckets. He is a mini Australian Shepherd, and he is the light of our lives. We need no children. We have him. We'll probably have kids someday, but we love this dog way too much. And for the first year or year and a half that we had Buckets, when we left the house, we would put him in a crate. We'd put him in a cage because we didn't want him to destroy our entire living room while we were gone. We learned that lesson the hard way. And so after a while, when Buckets got a little bit older, we said, hey, why don't we try leaving him out of his cage for a little bit to see how he does? And so the first time we left him for half an hour. And we came back and it was great. He didn't destroy anything, which was awesome. So the next time we let him go for about an hour, then 2 hours, then 4 hours. And now today, I am proud to say I am a good dog parent because we can leave Buckets alone in the house as long as we want and he doesn't destroy things. He doesn't need his cage anymore. But every single time we leave the house, what do you think that dog does? Every single time that sweet little dog sees me even put on my shoes, he walks right in and lays down in that cage. We don't even shut the door because he doesn't need the cage anymore, but he has been conditioned to choose his cage even though he no longer needs it. And it's a little bit of a silly example, and I'll be honest, I mostly just wanted to talk about my dog. But don't many of us do the exact same thing in our lives? You see, some of you got out of a toxic relationship months ago, but you never stopped texting the person. You never fully cut it off. You never fully moved on, and so now you feel like you are enslaved to a relationship that you thought you had ended months ago. Others of you know the objective truth. You've read it in Scripture. You've heard preachers tell you that you are fearfully and wonderfully made by God. That God knit you together in your mother's womb. That God didn't make a mistake when He made you. You know this, and yet how much time do you spend in front of the mirror just nitpicking your appearance? How much of a hard time do you have looking at a picture of yourself because you're too fat or you're too skinny or you aren't pretty enough or not good looking enough? Others of you might be like, well, John, you don't understand my upbringing. You don't understand the situation with my parents, right? My dad said things to me. My mom treated me in a certain way. They did not treat me right. And while I want you to know that is terrible, and I am so sorry that you had to live through that, I also want you to know that you don't have to let something that your dad said when you were 9 keep you in bondage when you're 19. You see, so many of us, we know the objective truth. We know that we have been set free. We've been liberated from our sin, from our past, from the things that used to have us chained. And yet, we're still slaves in our minds. You see, so many of us, we know we have been set free, but we still choose to live in chains. But there's a problem with that. There's a problem with a free person choosing to live in chains. And I actually want to show you a picture of what this looks like. I want to bring up Anthony, who is our producer. Can we give Anthony a big round of applause? Anthony is producing today. Anthony is doing a fantastic job. Anthony, how are you? Good. Fantastic. So Anthony, here's what I have. I have this pair of handcuffs here. This is not a magic show. This is not a magic show. I'm sorry. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to take these handcuffs, and I'm going to need you to put these on very tightly. Like in a way where you can't wriggle out of them, you know what I mean? Like I couldn't even get them off of you if I tried. Like very, very tight. Can you do that for me? All right, so just put them on your wrist as tight as you possibly can, please. Like really, don't skimp on me here, Anthony. I'm trusting you, okay? Just so that they don't. What's the problem?
I have big wrists.
Oh, you. Well, here. Hold on. So that they can't come off.
Who has small wrists?
Maybe. No, I mean, that's all the way. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. Anthony, there's a problem with these handcuffs. I'm sorry. Sorry, this is really embarrassing. So these are not going to go around your wrists because these don't work. These are broken, Anthony. And you see, here's the thing. You can't put on chains that are already broken, can you? You see it? You see, here's the thing. Here's the thing that I want them to know, Anthony. I want them to know that they can't be controlled by a relationship that they've already been delivered from. You see, you can't be trapped by an addiction that has been broken of its power. You know what I mean? What I want them to see is that you cannot live your old life again because Jesus died to give you a new one. What I want you to see, Anthony, is you can't put on chains that have already been broken. You can't go back to Egypt because you're not a slave anymore. And those chains that used to have you trapped, they don't even work anymore. So why would you choose those chains? Why would you go back to those chains when you could just set them down and begin to move forward with God? The chains don't work anymore. Let's give Anthony a round of applause. Thank you, Anthony. Fantastic. Fantastic. So good. So here's my question, though. Here's my question. How many of you are still wearing chains that don't even work anymore? How many of you are still allowing yourselves to be trapped by a past that Jesus went to a cross and died to set you free from? We talk about it all the time in church, don't we? We talk about and we sing about how Jesus, he has the power to break any chain, break every chain. And it's true. He really does. God has the power to break any sin, any addiction, any pattern in your life. But there is a part of that we leave out. And it's that, yes, Jesus can break the chain, but you have to drop the chain. You have to move on from it. You have to leave it behind. And so each and every one of us in this room, we have a choice this morning. When we learn the truth that Jesus has set us free, that we are no longer slaves, we can choose to go back to our chains. We can choose to go back to that person and try and lock ourselves to them. We can choose to go back to that sin. But the chains don't work anymore. So instead, we could choose to drop the chains, to leave it behind, to let God's grace be enough, and to begin to move forward with Him. You know, in my 14 years of my journey with God, I have watched as God has transformed so many areas of my life. I have watched as God has set me free from so many things. But just like anybody else, I still have times where I feel tempted to choose my chains, to go back to the thing that used to have me trapped. And so what I did was last year I took some time and I wrote down who I know God called and created me to be, who God has freed me to be in each and every area of my life. And I keep them on my phone. And what I do is anytime I sort of feel tempted to go back to my old ways, anytime I start to think that those chains, they actually sound kind of comfortable, anytime I want to go back to Egypt, I open up my phone and I remind myself of the freedom that Jesus died to give me. You know, one area of my life where I've walked through a lot of trials has actually been in my relationship with my physical appearance. I've struggled with a lot of body image issues over the years, and my relationship with my body and just having a healthy way of looking at myself. And I've gone through seasons where I work out too much so that I can eat too much. And then I hate myself, so I work out too much so I can eat too much, and I hate myself, and I feel enslaved in this cycle. And anytime I start to feel like, I want to go back to that, anytime I start to be tempted towards chains, I remember this. I remember I am grateful for the body God made and gave me. It is an instrument that I can use to glorify Him. Therefore, I take care of my body by getting exercise, eating well, and seeing the doctor on a consistent basis. I do not binge eat. I do not overwork myself. I do not neglect my body by avoiding the doctor. I do not make my body an idol. I just remind myself of the freedom that I have. Over the last several years, my relationship with my family, with my parents and my sister, it's gotten a little difficult. I don't see them as much as I used to, and I started to notice this pattern. Even when I do see them, I either completely check out, just sort of sit on the couch, or we end up getting in this huge fight. And it's very easy for me to think that, well, this is the way it's just going to be now that I'm an adult. I want to be clear. These are chains between me and my family. I'm not even sure they're totally broken yet. But I believe that one day they will be. And I know that one day I'll be tempted to go back and act the way that I used to with my family and treat them the way that I used to. And when I am tempted to do that, I will remind myself I am an intentional servant leader in my family. I show up and I bring my best self to them every time. I am not absent or unintentional in my family relationships because God has never been absent and unintentional with me. I do not sweep things under the rug, but I deal with issues head on with patience, humility, and grace. One more for you. Even in my career, even though I do ministry, I'll be honest with you, when I first started doing this kind of work, I went at it from a very unhealthy place. When I first started traveling around and speaking, I was enslaved to my idea of what success would look like in this career. I was enslaved to this idea of being big on YouTube or being this celebrity, famous speaker. I was enslaved to the idea of how much money I can make doing this. I'm just being real with you. I started this work obsessed with the wrong thing, chained to success instead of being chained to God. And I've made a lot of progress, I think, and God has really brought me on a journey. But every now and then where I start to long for that success and I'm longing to go back, I remind myself that before my work is my work, it's God's work. Therefore, I am dedicated to using my gifts to provide for my family, to give to others, but most of all, to glorify God. I do generous work that requires emotional labor. I bring my best, most authentic self every time. I do not take shortcuts. I do not make decisions based on fear or the opinions of others or pride. My work is ultimately not about me. This is just a simple way that I remind myself of the freedom that I have been given. This is a simple way for me to remind myself that these chains that used to hold me, they don't work anymore. And so in the next few minutes, as we sing and as we pray, I want to ask that God would bring to mind for you what it is you're allowing yourself to be chained to. What chains from your past you are choosing. And I want to pray that you would realize that those chains don't even work anymore. And I want to pray that each and every one of us would find the courage to drop those chains, to leave it behind, to leave Egypt behind and move forward with God. Would you stand and would you pray with me right now? Heavenly Father, God, I thank you so much. I thank you that you have the power to break any chain, to overcome any sin, no matter how deep, no matter how dark. It is true. The light and love of Jesus can shine into any darkness. I thank you that you give us new life. But Father, I'm also aware that there are people in this room who are choosing or tempted to go back. They're tempted to try and put on chains, to put on clothes, to put on a life that doesn't fit them anymore, that wouldn't work for them anymore. And maybe because they're afraid to move forward. Or maybe it's because they never really dropped it. They never really let it go in the first place. Would you give us the strength right now to pray the prayer, God, I'm dropping the chains. I'm dropping the chains of that relationship. I'm dropping the chains of the pain from that loss. I'm dropping the chains from that addiction. I'm dropping the chains to that fear. I'm dropping the chains to my insecurities. I'm dropping the chains to whatever it is that used to hold me. It's broken now. I'm dropping it and I'm moving forward with you because I believe in you. Lord, I pray a blessing over each and every person in this room. Help us move forward today. Help us as we sing in Jesus' name.
Seen it, my God is over all. I believe it, I have seen it, my God is over all. I believe it, I have seen it, my God is over. is over.
He is not only the God over all that we know, he is the God over all that you knew. Over all the things of your past, over all the mistakes you made, over all the things that used to hold you down and keep you captive. He's the God over all of that as well. And he's the God that broke the power of all sin so that we could move forward in a relationship with him, free from those chains, free from bondage, free from the things that used to hold us back or hold us down. We have freedom to move forward. If we haven't met yet, I'd love to meet you. I'm going to be down front. Love to chat, love to get your name, maybe make up a secret handshake, whatever. Otherwise, I hope that you will join us tomorrow for the final day of Spiritual Enrichment Week. It's going to be great. I really believe it. But otherwise, I pray that you all would go today and you would leave your chains behind. That you would know that the power of sin, it's been broken, it no longer holds you down, and that you would leave that behind and move forward with God. Blessings. Love you all.